Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and there is a lot to discuss in the world of IDP this week, talking trades, injuries, free agent signings, and despite the anti-IDP brigade cutting the power in my neighborhood, when I first tried to record this and then destroying the audio on the re-record, we can't let them win. Winning is reserved for you guys who tune in to this channel and absorb all the IDP information to set your lineups the right way. So let's show them that we won't be stopped, and let's get it. All right, week 8 is putting in work against us already. This is normally where I'd introduce my guest for the week, but like I said at the top, unfortunately, my Canadian igloo lost power right before we were about to record Wednesday night and didn't come back on until about 1:30 in the morning. So Wednesday night. Very unfortunately, we're without the great Joey the Tooth this week. This is a big loss, obviously, because he is a much better voice, much more handsome than I am. So I apologize to you, the listeners, and especially the viewers on YouTube, because it's just me this week going through our game by game recap. Unfortunately, like I said, the anti IDP agents completely destroyed the audio when I tried to re-record this, so it is a late drop. Recording this early Friday morning. And it was originally going to come out on time, but we can't let the machines win, like I said, for the sake of my mental health and humanity. So if you're team humanity, then please like and subscribe as a way to give the middle finger to the machines and show them what's up. Also, I'd really appreciate it. But I'm going to do our game by game breakdown, as always, discussing all the key IDP information to get you ready for the week. And again, if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, I get it, especially since it's just me this week. But there's no teams on a bye, but we'll have the timestamps in the episode so you could jump around, find the games and players that you're looking for. And again, if there's something I don't cover, you can ask questions in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them there as well. I'll also link the IDP fantasy report and the IDP rankings in the episode description. And yeah, one of the links will be to our new rankings page as well. So a lot of the updates and stuff regarding injuries and how players move based on that will be on the rankings page, not so much in the rankings article. So you'll be able to get access to all that either way with a PFF Plus subscription. So let's get right into it because we had Thursday night football last night. Usually this is where I preview the Thursday night football game, but instead I'd actually going to do a quick recap of what we got here. And Ivan Pace was our full-time linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings, as expected, with Blake Cashman out due to turf toe. Ivan Pace, he was the only linebacker essentially that played. Cameron Grugier-Hill 8.5% of snaps, Ivan Pace 100%. Ivan Pace, really nice game, 13 total tackles, 18.3% tackle rate on those 71 snaps that he played. Vibes alone, Ivan Pace is one of the best linebackers in the NFL for that reason. But yeah, we'll see when Blake Cashman comes back dealing with the turf toe. Obviously, when he comes back, it's a likely downgrade to Ivan Pace, unfortunately, right? So we know that this is very much a one linebacker system in Brian Flores' defense. So Pace will play more than what Cameron Grugier-Hill was playing, but it won't necessarily be enough to be a consistent IDP starter the way he is right now as one of the top options. So that'll be unfortunate. Jonathan Grenard, who's been playing really well, didn't have much of a game last night against the Rams, which I would have expected against that offensive line. Has been one of the worst in the league, but just wasn't able to get home. These games happen all the time for pass rushers, and unfortunately, it happened for Grenard this week. Andrew Van Ginkel as well, the top scoring edge defender in IDP right now, or at least going into the Thursday night games. Didn't have much either, just tackles for those guys. So on the Rams side of things, as we know, Troy Reeder is out. He's on injured reserve. So Christian Roseboom did see a snap increase. He played about 94% of the snaps. So came off, I think it was basically just a few snaps. That's all it really was. So The other replacements at linebacker was essentially a rotation between Omar Spates and Jake Hummel. I think Hummel might have played like one third down or maybe two, but it was like third and short kind of thing, run situations. But neither of these guys really played on those later downs. They were strictly for early downs, first and second run situations. They were not used on the field in passing situations. I don't know if that's going to increase going forward here because Troy Reader obviously out for the 4 weeks on IR. So if somebody's going to increase their snap share, I'd imagine it's Omar Spates, but this is a defense now that we've seen in recent weeks, even with Troy Reader healthy, they're not deploying full-time linebackers, right? They're looking to take these guys off the field in obvious passing situations. So it's not one of the better situations to attack as far as IDP goes. Like Omar Spates really for deep leagues here, and Christian Roseboom has a little bit more play in a little bit wider range of IDP formats, but nothing really exciting from these guys. Other than that, for the Rams, Cam Curl, disappointing game. Just the two tackles, obviously, after the monster game last week, but he did leave this game for a little bit with an injury, and then came back in, which was good to see at least. They only played 50 defensive snaps, the Rams, so really wasn't a lot there for this defense to be able to put up. It's same thing with Quentin Lake, didn't do much. Jared Verse, he was excellent again, a sack and a half, I believe. Byron Young as well got the safety, despite it being a face mask. We'll take it for IDP purposes. But yeah, other than that, it was not much going on this Rams defense, other than this new look linebacker core with Troy Reader out. All right, let's move to the Sunday slate now and start with the early window here. Green Bay at Jacksonville. Now, the only good thing, I guess, about recording these episodes a little bit later in the week is that we get the Thursday practice report, and Quay Walker was limited participant on Thursday. So didn't practice on Wednesday, but was limited on Thursday. Now, he's in the concussion protocol, I believe it is. So not sure if he'll clear. If he doesn't, then Eric Wilson was the guy that wore the green dot. We talked about this on the IDP recap episode. Eric Wilson would be somebody that we can use as a replacement for Quay Walker this week. It's not the most amazing matchup against Jacksonville. Jacksonville ranking 24th in terms of tackles allowed to the linebacker position. But Edrin Cooper and Isaiah McDuffie not necessarily expected to see a significant increase in snaps. Those guys were rotating drives before the Quay Walker injury, and they continued to do so after the Quay Walker injury. So it seems like they're very intentionally waiting to give Edrin Cooper a much larger role and just kind of easing him in. So on their, as far as the defensive backs in Green Bay goes, at first it was Javon Bullard as the starting safety next to Xavier McKinney, but last week we did see Javon Bullard move into the nickel role while Evan Williams played the full-time safety snaps. So this is obviously a downgrade to Javon Bullard. It's not a terrible matchup for like the nickel corner job because the Jaguars play a higher rate of 11 personnel, at least above average, but he's still like safety 45 for me this week. Evan Williams would be the much better option among the two, assuming they continue this from what we saw last week, this usage. But they've shaken things up before, so we'll have to kind of wait and see. But Evan Williams, like a safety 3 for me, nothing too exciting there either. Rashawn Gary, he got his second sack of the season. We need to see some consistency from him before really trusting him. On the Jacksonville side of things, Foye Oluokun, his practice window is open. He has 21 days to return now. I imagine he's going to go back to being the LB1 once he's healthy. I don't know if he'll be back this week. The only problem is if and when he does return, it's also probably the return of that ridiculous rotation that had Foye only playing 80% of snaps. I'm really hoping that Ryan Nielsen learned that, keeping your best players on the field yields better results than subbing them out for the Chad Mumas and the Ventrell Millers of the world. But like, I mean, I get that Ventrell Miller, he's been an efficient tackler. We love him for that reason, but he's been a liability in coverage. 35.1 coverage grade, ranks 86th among 91 linebackers. Some teams don't have a choice at linebacker. Jacksonville absolutely does, especially when Foye is back. So no reason to take Foye off the field, but I mean, that'll be up to them, right? Doug Peterson was already talking about rotation again on Wednesday, so my hopes aren't high that rotation goes away. For the Jacksonville edge rushers, really tough matchup for Josh Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker going against Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom. They're two high-end pass blockers at the offensive tackle position, as well as Jordan Love, who's been great at avoiding sacks. So I have Josh Hines Allen as edge 15 this week, Trayvon Walker as edge 30. Josh Hines Allen, pass rush metrics really solid, very similar to what they were last year when he had a 17 and a half sack season. The difference is the sacks aren't there, right? That's not up to him necessarily. He's playing the same way, same high level. It's just you need to be able to get a little bit lucky to get those sacks as well. So, yeah, they'll come. It's just this is a tougher matchup for those to get there this week. And then Jacksonville's DBs really quickly. Antonio Johnson's role decreased significantly this past week. He played only 32% of snaps, essentially was a full-time safety before. Now he's been essentially relegated as a backup. So Darnell Savage, who had been manning the slot previously, he moved into a full-time safety role. And then Jarian Jones worked as the team's nickel corner. So big downgrade to Javon Bullard. Sorry, not Javon Bullard. Antonio Johnson there, and a slight upgrade for Darnell Savage, but nobody that I'm really interested in there for the safeties. If you need a starting safety, then Darnell Savage would be your guy. Okay, Arizona and Miami is next. Kaiser White, I like him quite a bit. He's LB11 for me this week. Obviously, Miami, they gave up a ton of tackles to the Indianapolis linebackers last week. I wouldn't expect that to be, that high again, especially we got Tua back, so it's a new quarterback in the situation. Expecting more passing situations as well from Miami, which could potentially take like Mac Wilson off the field a little bit more. So I have Mac Wilson more in that LB3 range. It's a nice matchup. I just don't know if he's going to play as much as he has in recent weeks when he's faced more run-heavy offenses. So something to kind of keep in mind there. But other than that, for Arizona, like obviously we love Budda Baker. He's been amazing. The pass rush somehow gets worse because Dennis Gardeck tore his ACL and he's out for the season. So that's kind of Arizona for me. And then on the Miami side of things, David Long, still not a full-time linebacker. We talked about this in the recap episode as well. Anthony Walker is still kind of working in there. So not sure that I want to trust David Long this week. I do imagine that, if they are intending to get him back to a full-time role, then he'll see an increase this week. But it's a decent matchup if you are forced to play him. The Cardinals giving up the 6th most tackles to the linebacker position, but it is at least a little bit concerning that David Long isn't playing those full-time snaps yet after returning essentially 3 weeks ago, right? Because there was the bye week in there for Miami as well. So something to keep in mind this week. Javon Holland is dealing with a broken hand. Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, said that he probably expects Holland to play with a broken hand. But if not, then Marcus May is the backup there. Other than that, again, not a lot going on in this game. I hate the pass rush for both teams. Just very little interest in trying to find the right guy to play in this matchup along the defensive line. Again, we have no bye weeks this week. There are a lot of different pass rushers that we can target out there. This isn't necessarily the matchup that is so juicy that we have to find that guy. So I'd be avoiding the pass rushers in this game where I can. Okay, quickly, ad break from our friends at DraftKings. The best part of football season, checking out the post-game stats. Which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns? Which quarterbacks threw for less than 350 yards? Which linebackers got double-digit tackles? Think you could pick who will do what before kickoff? Then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. You could actually do a linebacker tackles as well, or just tackles in general for defensive players is included in there. I know that much. And for the first time, Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. In Connecticut, must be 18 plus age, and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable. Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Okay, moving on to the next game, Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. Really nice matchup, obviously, for the Baltimore defensive line going against that Cleveland offensive line, which it sucks. We know that they've been really bad this season. They do have a new quarterback in there, Jameis Winston, likely an upgrade over Deshaun Watson. Whether he can avoid the pressure that this O line will let through this week, I don't know. If the small sample of this season tells us anything, he's had two pressure dropbacks. He's allowed a sack on one of them, so not great there, obviously. And it's a nice matchup for the Kyle Van Noy, Odafe Owes of the world. I got both of those guys inside the top 24 edge rushers this week. Nnamdi Madubuike as well for DT required leagues. Travis Jones as well. He's been great, and could potentially get involved in the action for those DT required leagues as well. I had Marlon Humphrey in here, but it looks like he's not going to play this week. He did avoid a major injury for his knee. He was CB1 in the ranks for me last week. He got 2 picks, didn't even play in the second half. We could have got more from Marlon Humphrey, but he did not practice on Thursday. So this could cause Kyle Hamilton to play more in the slot this week and take away some of those box snaps, but still really like Kyle Hamilton. Safety 11 for me this week. Not overly concerned there. The Browns do play a lot of 11 personnel, so he's going to be in the slot quite a bit. It seems like with Marlon Humphrey out of this game. On the Browns side of things, they kind of get the opposite difficulty level for their defensive line against the Baltimore offensive line, which has been really good. They're obviously much better than the Browns in pass blocking. Luckily for the Browns, they have Myles Garrett, as unfortunate as that might be for him. But Myles Garrett, one of those types of players where even in a bad matchup, even when he puts up zeros, we're playing him for the upside, right? Like we know that there's certain players that can give us multi-sack games multi times in a season, right? And we kind of live with the zeros and the floor because of that. Because again, we want to attack upside in fantasy lineups a lot of the times. That's what helps us win our matchups. That's what helps us win championships. So Myles Garrett, one of those players we're not benching regardless of matchup. He's just too good. That's what it boils down to. He's one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL, and on any given week he could put up a monster game, even in a matchup like this. So Myles Garrett remains in lineups. The Browns linebackers, essentially, it's just Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I have him as LB21 this week, full-time player now. He's top 10 in linebacker scoring for IDP. The only problem is he's been inefficient as a tackler, so he's made a lot of his points from sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles, pass breakups, not nearly as sustainable as we'd like that to be. So the tackle rate is just 11.4% for JOK, the average being around 13.3%. So a little bit concerning that we'll get some regression there, but hopefully, he could positively regress as far as tackle rate goes. We'll have to see what happens. And then Grant Delpit, really love Grant Delpit. He's safety 4 for me this week. The Ravens giving up the 9th most tackles per game to the safety position, and Grant Delpit just playing a ton in the box, which obviously we love for IDP purposes. So we can continue to roll him out there. All right, let's go to Tennessee at Detroit now. And this is one of the first big moves of the week because we got Jerome Baker traded to Tennessee for Ernest Jones. So we'll focus on the Tennessee side of things and we'll get to Ernest Jones later. But Jerome Baker coming in from Seattle on Wednesday. It's a shorter week. It's gonna take time to acclimate to the defense. So I'd be hesitant about putting Jerome Baker in a lineup this week. I think they give him a few snaps, get him used to the defense, but I don't expect him to necessarily step right into a full-time role. I think Jack Gibbons will get some playing time this week. Probably will play more than Jerome Baker, so I'd feel a little bit better about Jack Gibbons this week. We'll have to kind of see if they say anything prior to the game about usage or anything like that. But the Titans, I mean, the nice thing for Jerome Baker's purposes or potential here for IDP in the long run is that the Titans have been a 2 linebacker team this season under Denard Wilson. Personally, I don't think Jerome Baker is very good, but him and Kenneth Murray are probably going to be the 2 full-time starters. So again, I'm not playing Jerome Baker this week. I would rather play Jack Gibbons if given the choice. We'll see how it shakes out. But I think, in a week or two, Jerome Baker and Kenneth Murray can both be safe plays as full-time players. But right now, it's just Kenneth Murray that I trust the most. As assuming he's healthy, he's also a little bit banged up, but um, yeah. Jeffrey Simmons is the other piece of this Tennessee defense. He's been a little quiet. It's not an easy pass rush matchup for him. The Lions are giving up the second most tackles per game to the defensive line position. So don't mind Jeffrey Simmons this week. He's another one of those guys that I'm happy to kind of stick into a lineup again, and know that he has the potential for big games. And then on the Detroit side of things, the non Aiden Hutchinson defensive line, they're not good. I really don't want any of these guys other than Aleem McNeil in DT required leagues. Um, their linebackers, it's still just Alex Anzalone, who continues to be very mid. He's like LB 40-ish for me this week when all 32 teams are playing. There's just a lot of linebackers that I'd rather plug in ahead of him. I mean, it is a nice matchup against Tennessee, giving up the fifth most tackles to the linebacker position, but he's another one of those guys that has been, below average as far as tackle efficiency goes. So could have a nice week if you need to start him, but I'm not excited about him. And then Brian Branch, it's a poor matchup for him, but it was last week as well, and he still rocked it. So he's just impossible to sit at this point. I'm leaving Brian Branch locked into lineups regardless of matchup. Okay, Indianapolis at Houston is next. The nice thing about the Colts linebackers this week is that EJ Speed was a full practice on both Wednesday and Thursday. So him and Zaire Franklin are going to be back out there. No need to worry about the sorting of the Jalen Carleys or Grant Stewarts of the world. Jalen Carleys didn't practice both Wednesday or Thursday either. So it doesn't seem like he'll play. It does seem like Grant Stewart will play probably the base role, but it's like a 30% snap share. It'll be around there. Nothing too exciting. I wouldn't mess around with that on a week when we have so many linebackers playing. For the Indianapolis safeties, Nick Cross, he's safety 3 for me this week. It's a great matchup. The Texans giving up the second most tackles per game to the safety position. Nick Cross continues to play closer to the line of scrimmage in Gus Bradley's defense, so we like him for that quite a bit. And then DeForest Buckner, his practice window is open, and on Thursday he was a full participant. So you can plug DeForest Buckner potentially back into lineups for those DT required leagues. Probably not a lot of guys that I'm starting ahead of him. If I remember exactly where I have him in the ranks, because I did have to include him after the rankings article went out. DT 11, so like slight hesitancy just as far as coming back from injury goes, and if they limit his snaps at all. But again, one of the better players at that position, so really hard to sit is DeForest Buckner once he's back in the lineup. And then other than that, Leatu Latu, he's got 2 sacks now, and he's actually still playing ahead of Kwity Paye. But it is like an edge 3 for me this week. Nothing overly exciting there either. On the Texans side of things, another kind of tough matchup here for Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. They both had a tough matchup last week against the Green Bay Packers. We talked about them earlier, but they were both at least able to get a sack in that game, which I think was really promising to see because they have been playing well. And I know the sack production hasn't been there or wasn't there for the early part of the season, but both of these guys really good players. It's just it doesn't get any easier this week. They're going against the Colts offensive line, which is the best pass blocking unit in the league right now. But again, they're playing really well. I have Danielle Hunter as edge 18, Will Anderson as edge 19 this week. So for the most part, we're starting them in 2 defensive end leagues. The Houston linebackers are now featuring Devin White. So kind of a lot to look at here, right? Because Azeez Al-Shaair and Henry To'o missed last week's game. It seems like both of them are going to miss this week's game as well because they did not practice on Thursday. I am not expecting Devin White to be anything here. We'll see if he can prove us wrong, but I'm fully expecting this as Neville Hewitt and Jake Hansen again. I think if Devin White does play, he's probably going to eat into Jake Hansen's snap share a little bit, but probably not enough that's going to be, something that we're going to want to start in IDP. Neville Hewitt would definitely be the guy that I'd prefer in this Texans linebacker core right now. Hopefully Aziz Al-Shaair and To'o To'o or Christian Harris, whoever, can get back soon, because it's ugly. Devin White is not the answer. He's like the new age Quan Alexander, essentially, right? He was once an IDP asset. He's been never really been any good, and now he's just kind of he's going to bounce around the league enough where each time he lands somewhere, people are going to ask, is this something? And it's not really ever going to turn out to be anything, I don't think, because Devin White is just not very good. Even if he gets a starting job, like, he's not good enough to have much value, as he's been one of the most inefficient tacklers at the position in recent years, every single year. So it's just a no thank you for me as far as Devin White goes. So we could pick up Neville Hewitt. I'd much rather play him. I'd rather play Jake Hansen over Devin White as well. I know Devin White's been practicing, but again, not expecting starting snaps there for Devin White. Okay, let's go to the Jets and the New England Patriots next. Starting with the Jets, it'd be really nice if Quinnen Williams woke up. Like, he just hasn't looked like himself. Like, outside of a couple of games this season where he was able to make an impact, he's just been ineffective, which is not really what we've seen from Quinnen in recent years. I don't know what's going on, if he's playing with injury or whatever, but he definitely has the pedigree to be a top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. He's just been far from that this season, and he's going to have to do better here in the second half of the season, I think, to avoid sinking his dynasty stock as well, because he was DT1 for me coming into this season. Amazing grades last season. I know he didn't have the sack production that he did the year before, but he was arguably playing significantly better than he was. And then just a huge drop off this year. I don't know what's going on there, but it's a nice matchup this week against the Patriots offensive line, which hasn't been great. They rank 30th in pass blocking grade this season. Drake May back there taking some sacks as well. So Quinnen, he's he's DT 12 for me now, because I put DeForest Buckner ahead of him. So still playable. It's just it's kind of discouraging that he hasn't had that consistency this season. But also on the defensive line, Will McDonald and Hassan Reddick. I have Will McDonald as edge 9. He now has a sack in 3 straight games. That's given him 8 on the season, continuing his breakout year. Really, up until this last game, though, Will McDonald hadn't really been putting the pass rush metrics that were overly encouraging that he'd be able to kind of keep up this pace. So I do, even with that 85.7 pass rush grade last week, which was the best of his career, I think, he's going to have to show some consistency in that department, to expect these sacks regularly. I do think there will be some regression here at some point for Will McDonald, but not necessarily this week, because it is a really nice matchup against that New England offensive line. Like I said, 30th in pass blocking grade. And then Hassan Reddick, there's a chance he gets out there this week. We'll see what that looks like. It's only the first time that he's been practicing this week, so it's going to be hard to go in there and immediately play a full-time role. This doesn't affect Will McDonald in any kind of way, but just somebody to keep an eye on for Hassan Reddick, because he is a really good pass rusher, but how much he'll be trusted in that defense right away is going to be the question here. So we'll have to see what the snaps look like. And then on the Jets linebacker side of things, CJ Mosley and Jamien Sherwood continue to kind of, I guess, well, I mean, Jamien Sherwood specifically has been the one that's kind of kept CJ Mosley off the field. I know they've been saying that it's because of injury and CJ Mosley's working his way back. I don't know. Part of me feels like maybe there's a changing of the guard there, but we'll have to, again, it's another situation we'll have to monitor. I'm not starting CJ Mosley this week unless, the coaching staff comes out and lets us know that CJ Mosley is going to be back to his normal full-time role this week, and Sherwood will go back to being the base linebacker. They did give us that information last week, which was nice of them. I don't know that they're necessarily going to do that again this week. So just keeping an eye on that. I don't know that I want to trust either guy if we don't know exactly what the situation is going to look like. And then the safeties, Chuck Clark's on IR. Tony Adams did not practice on Thursday. Ashton Davis also left last game with an injury. I don't think he practiced either. So Jalen Mills is kind of the last man standing for the Jets safety room, if you really need a safety this week. And then potentially Isaiah Oliver as well. Like, there's just not many options here. The Jets are running through safeties like crazy, so hopefully they can get healthy. But yeah, there's it's not like the best matchup either. Patriots giving up the 25th most tackles per game to the safety position. Okay, on New England side of things, Keon White, we talked about him in the recap pod. He just hasn't delivered on that potential that he flashed the first few weeks of the season, where he had the playing time, he had the pass rush metrics, he had the production, all of it to kind of get our, or at least my hopes up. Unfortunately, it's all kind of fading now. So I hope he can bounce back, but he's like edge 27 for me this week. So again, keeping an eye on Keon White, but not necessarily the locked in starter that he was looking like he could be. And then Marte Mapu, another poor matchup for him as a safety, because the Jets are giving up the 25th most tackles per game to the safety position. But the usage for Mapu is elite. He played 68% in this of his snaps in the box last week. We love that. So I think he's still startable as like a low end safety too. I'd much rather play Kyle Duggar though, just because we know what Kyle Duggar can do. He's done it more consistently, so I trust him. He's safety 8 for me this week, again, regardless of matchup. But I think Mapu can still be startable. It's just there'll be better matchups for him to kind of deliver on that potential with that usage. Okay, let's go to Atlanta and Tampa Bay next. And it does seem like Troy Anderson might be back this week for Atlanta's linebackers. He was a limited participant on Thursday. This is bad news for Nate Landman, who had been playing a full-time role. I think, with Troy Anderson and Landman both healthy, I think we see them splitting time again as, one of them playing the early downs, one of them playing the later downs. So kind of eats into both of their value as far as IDP goes. So not trusting them outside of the very deepest of leagues. I think, again, with every team playing this week, we should have options to replace them. But if you're in a super deep league and don't have those options, it's not the end of the world to play one of these guys. They'll be able to get on the field, but, the potential is going to be capped by that playing time. And then the only other piece for Atlanta, because again, their pass rush is terrible. Safeties are solid. We know who they are. But Sweet D Alford, their nickel cornerback, he's CB9 for me this week. He has a shot at IDP redemption this week going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who he faced in week 5. He had 3 tackles on 8 snaps before he was forced to leave with a concussion. He's in a great spot to produce this week as he was that week, because the Buccaneers, even though their offense has lost some key players, they are still likely to be one of the more 11 personnel heavy offenses in the league, which is going to keep a productive nickel corner like D. Alford on the field and involved in tackles quite heavily again this week. So do quite like Sweet D. Alford this week. All right, Tampa Bay. Their linebackers, Levante David, I have his LB16 this week. I have KJ Britt in that LB3 range. LB35, I think, is exactly, it might be a little bit higher than that now. But Servassier Dennis is out for the year. So this is actually good news for KJ Britt's value, because those were guys that were splitting their time at linebacker as well when they were both healthy. But KJ Britt has been playing full-time snaps with Servassier Dennis out of the mix. So that's been nice to see for KJ Britt's value. And then Levante David, like I mentioned, or in IDP for his position, but I do worry about regression for him as well, because probably more so actually than JOK, because his tackle rate is significantly worse. 9.1%, again, the average being 13.3. So this is really low. And he's been really dependent on big plays so far this year. So, again, expecting some regression there as far as big plays go, which is going to knock down his IDP value if he can't get that tackle rate up. We've seen him at least be a strong tackler before, but that has dipped some in recent years here as he's gotten older. So it's been really poor this year, that tackle efficiency. So I am kind of hoping for some maybe regression to the mean there as far as his tackle rate goes, especially as those big plays won't be there every week to keep his kind of value afloat. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. I wouldn't be surprised if I start moving Levante David down the rankings a little bit more. Also on Tampa Bay is yes, Diaby. I have him as edge 21 this week. Yaya Diaby, that is. We talked about him as a buy low candidate last week because he had been playing so well. He was earning high end pass rush metrics for the position. He only had the one sack on the year. It was a tough matchup against the Ravens, but he got a sack again. So that was nice to see from him. It's only still only two sacks on the year, so I think he can still be a good buy low candidate. He should see a lot of Caleb McGarry this week. Caleb McGarry, the right tackle for the Falcons, 53.9 pass blocking grade. That ranks 62nd among 74 offensive tackles. The only thing is Kirk Cousins is doing a really nice job avoiding sacks this season with a 14.3% pressure to sack conversion rate. So I like Diaby, but again, the matchup isn't as ideal as it seems when just looking at the offensive line because Kirk's done a nice job avoiding sacks. Tyke Smith, I won't go. He didn't practice on Thursday. I liked this matchup for Tyke Smith as well. Falcons play 11 personnel more than any team in the NFL at 90%. So would have been a nice matchup for Tyke Smith, but DNP on Thursday. So he would have been CB8 for me. We'll scratch that now that we have the updated information there because it doesn't seem like he'll play. Okay, Philadelphia at Cincinnati is next up on the slate here. And let's start with Josh Sweat of the Philadelphia Eagles. He now has a sack in 3 straight games after going the first 3 games of the year without one. His playing time, his pass rush metrics, they've both been solid. And he can really be that weekly, starter in our lineups. I think I have him as edge 17. So Josh Sweat, it's not a terrible matchup against the Bengals offensive line. And against Joe Burrow, both of those just a little bit above average as far as pass blocking and pressure to sack conversion rate goes. So still like Josh Sweat quite a bit. Zach Bond, he was questionable coming into this week with a shoulder injury. He left last game, but he did practice on Thursday. So Zach Bond does seem like he'll be back this week. If for whatever reason he suffers a setback or he ends up being out of this game, it was Oren Burks who replaced him for that one snap before garbage time last week. So I would think that they would be Oren Burks over the rookie Jeremiah Trotter if we're in a really desperate spot. But hopefully Zach Bond plays. We don't got to worry about it. N'Kobe Dean as well. Both of these guys proving to be really good options. I have N'Kobe Dean as LB12, Zach Bond as LB13. Yeah, they're just been really solid, both playing full-time roles. So we could continue to roll them out there. Cooper DeJean, I think I've been saying Dijon. I found out that it's actually DeJean. I don't really care either way, but I'll try to say it properly. Cooper DeJean, I have as CB28 this week. Cincinnati, they're playing 61% of their snaps in 11 personnel. That's slightly below average. So we might not see the full-time snap share from Cooper DeJean this week, which will obviously limit his production. So he's a starter in like leagues where you're starting 3 cornerbacks essentially for me this week. On the Cincinnati side of things, Geno Stone left last game with an injury, but he did practice on Thursday. So that was nice to see. If you've been starting Geno Stone, you can continue to start him. It hasn't been amazing. The only thing is I wouldn't be starting Von Bell. We talked about this in the recap episode, but Jordan Battle has been slowly chipping away at Von Bell's snap share, often playing like entire drives next to Geno Stone while Bell stays on the sideline. So it doesn't happen enough where Jordan Battle is likely to kind of take over full time for Von Bell anytime soon, but it's happening just a little more each week, which is enough to kind of hurt Bell's IDP value, if nothing else, right? And it's such a deep position. There's just going to be better options that we can trust that are playing 100% roles. So I'm not interested in Von Bell or Jordan Battle this week. And it does seem like Geno Stone should be back this week. Other than that, I have Trey Hendrickson as edge 8. He's just been very, very good as a pass rusher. Sam Hubbard has not been very good as a pass rusher. He's edge 40 for me. I know he scored some IDP points, but I'm not trusting it as sustainable going forward. He's done it on like a safety and a big game. I think it was against Well, he had a sack against the Browns as well. Like everybody, I could have had a sack against the Browns offensive line. Probably not, but uh, I'm just not trusting Sam Hubbard outside of very, very deep leagues. He's been really poor. One of the worst pass rushers at his position this season. So trusting Trey Hendrickson and Trey Hendrickson only. Okay, one more ad break here before we clean up the rest of the late window games, and it's from our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFFfantasy. That's linkedin.com/PFFfantasy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's go to the late window games here. New Orleans Saints at the Los Angeles Chargers. Pete Werner was, I believe, a limited participant on Thursday. This doesn't really matter all that much. The second linebacker spot in New Orleans has been pretty poor for IDP, whether it's Werner, Willie Gay, Anthony Orji, doesn't really matter. Demario Davis is the lone full-time linebacker, and he's also really efficient. It's just like one of those man-heavy defenses that we talked about this offseason where, tackle efficiency does get sapped quite a bit. And then if you're not playing a full-time role, like this LB2 role is in New Orleans, it's not great either. So they'll have their weeks, but consistently, I'm not trusting most of these guys outside of deep leagues. Other than that, for the Saints, Paulson Adebo, unfortunately, our CB1 for the season, suffered a season-ending leg injury on Thursday Night Football last week. This could actually be a good thing for Alontae Taylor, though. Alontae Taylor was playing strictly in the nickel prior to the Paulson Adebo injury. So there were weeks when he was coming off the field. We talk about the 11 personnel situations that he was coming off the field in those when offenses weren't in 11. But now it seems like he's going to be filling in for Paulson Adebo out wide, as well as playing his nickel corner role, right? So instead of coming off the field, he'll just play wide corner, which we'd like to see. And then in those 11 personnel situations, he'll continue to play in the slot. So this could be really nice for Alontae Taylor's IDP value. I think I have him inside of the top 10 cornerbacks for this week. Yeah, CB7. So like Alontae Taylor quite a bit. And then Carl Granderson, he's like, I think edge 25 for me. Solid, but nothing like overly exciting there for this week's matchup. On the Chargers side of things, I don't know if we're going to get Joey Bosa back this week because we never know what's going on with Joey Bosa as far as injuries go. Even if he does play, it's not going to likely be enough snaps to, be able to trust him in lineups. It's a great matchup too against backup quarterbacks and the worst pass blocking unit in the NFL with the Saints offensive line right now. So desperate spots. If you need to play Joey Bosa, maybe you can, but really it's Khalil Mack here is the answer. He's edge 6 for me. He just posted a 91.9 pass rush grade last week. That was his best mark in a single game since week 3 of 2020. Again, great matchup against the Saints offensive line. They're now the worst pass blocking unit in the NFL. And then as far as the Chargers linebackers, Diane Henley is like LB45 for me this week, and that's because that rotation did return last week as expected when Junior Colson was back in the mix. Diane Henley played 81% of snaps. Denzel Perriman played 58%. Junior Colson played 54%. So they're rotating enough, in that position that it's killing the value of all these guys. So Diane Henley is the one that if you have to start somebody, I would. Saints giving up the 7th most tackles to the linebacker position. So it's just a deep league option more than anything. So that's about it for this Chargers linebacker core. Okay, moving on to Buffalo at Seattle next. Sorry, my voice is starting to go. Gregory Rousseau is interesting for me. So I have him as edge 12 this week. He put together another really dominant performance against the Titans last week, which we did expect, but it only resulted in a half sack, but he had 11 total pressures in that game, 6 QB hits. Um, it's another nice matchup against a poor pass blocking unit in Seattle this week. Geno Smith has done a really nice job avoiding sacks, but man, I like Gregory Rousseau still, what he's doing this year. I know it hasn't resulted in sacks outside of the first couple weeks of the season, but Gregory Rousseau, he should also be facing Mike Jarrell this week at right tackle, who's a 6th-round rookie, I believe, because they got some injuries there. So could be a nice matchup for Gregory Rousseau. I have high hopes for him, but depends who your other options are. Terrell Bernard for Buffalo did not practice on Thursday, dealing with that ankle injury. So Balin Spector now becomes an option here. I believe I put Balin Spector in the updated rankings because that wasn't the case when I put the rankings article out. Let me see. Balin Spector. This is always great audio when I'm trying to figure this out live, but essentially, Balin Spector's going to be playing full-time snaps, right? So for that reason, he's a startable linebacker, probably more in that LB2 range, going against the Titan or against the Seahawks, because Seattle giving up the 31st most tackles per game to the linebacker position. It's not a good matchup. So both Balin Spector and Dorian Williams, I've tempered expectations for them. I have Dorian Williams is LB 26. So Balin Spector, I'd probably be around the LB 20-ish range as well for me, probably just ahead of Dorian Williams, if only because he's expected to play the full-time role where Dorian Williams might come off a little bit. But keep an eye on that. You could add Balin Spector again, and he should have some value this week. All right, but let's talk about the exciting change here in Seattle, which their linebacker core is now featuring Ernest Jones. So again, Ernest Jones and Jerome Baker swapping teams on Wednesday, which my immediate reaction was, okay, this is great, for long-term value here for Ernest Jones, or at least rest of season value. I think he'll still, be in a nice defense, full-time role. I didn't think that it was going to really have an effect on this week for him because I didn't think he was going to be playable this week. But Mike McDonald has come out and he's been talking about Ernest Jones playing immediately and playing a significant role. Like, it sounds like he's going to be a starter right away in the first week. I don't know how much I want to trust that, but I mean, if you're in a spot where you don't have the options, like, maybe you put Ernest Jones in and he ends up playing whatever 75% of snaps, something like that, because there is still, like, again, like I mentioned with Jerome Baker, some acclimating to a new defense that needs to be done. But the way they've talked about this is it sounds like they expect him to immediately play. So sure, I mean, if that's the case and we believe them, then maybe Ernest Jones becomes an option, like an LB3 this week, at the very best. But it does, they at least seem more optimistic about him playing than I've heard anything from Tennessee regarding Jerome Baker. So yeah, I mean, I guess when your other option is Tyrese Knight, like a 5th-round rookie, then maybe you do trust Ernest Jones a little bit more, at least in Tennessee. Jack Gibbons, that has starting experience in that defense. But yeah, Ernest Jones is now a Seattle Seahawk. Again, it's a defense that allows for 2 full-time linebackers on a weekly basis. So not really worried about Tyrell Dodson's IDP value either. I think both of these guys can have value every single week. And it's a nice situation for Ernest Jones in a probably slightly better IDP friendly defense than what he was in Tennessee as well. So hopefully he continues to be a useful IDP for us. I think he will. As far as their safeties go, Julian Love, amazing. He's been so good this season. We continue to start him every week. Kobe Bryant put up a nice game last week. I think he even led the team in tackles, but played 90% of his snaps from a deep safety role. We could pick him up. We could play him if needed while Rayshon Jenkins is on IR, but I expect some kind of inconsistency in those tackle numbers from him. Boye Mafe and Derek Hall are also they've both been playing really well. The only thing to keep an eye on with Boye Mafe is for whatever reason, it seems like they're very slowly easing him back in. Um, Played less than 40% of snaps last week. The same thing the week before that. He had the strip sack last week, which really helped, but concerning as far as the snap share goes. I do expect it to increase, especially in a tougher matchup this week where they'll need to rely on him. But he's more kind of in that high end edge 3 range for me this week. It's a tough matchup against the Bills. Josh Allen not taking a lot of sacks. And there's a little bit of a concern there with the snap share. Derek Hall, I'm trading almost the same way. He's playing a lot more, but he's not as good of a pass rusher as Boye Mafe, despite the production showing that he is. There's going to be some regression there with Derek Hall as well. Has made a lot of big plays here recently. So we'll see if that continues here against Buffalo, but treating them both in kind of that edge 3 type range. Moving on to Carolina at Denver next, and I don't know if we'll get Josie Jewell back or not this week for the Carolina linebackers. He was a limited participant on Thursday, so if he's back, I expect him to be the lone full-time linebacker for the Carolina Panthers. I have him as LB29 this week. Trevin Wallace, um, he's been excellent. I know he had a down game last week, but he's going to probably move down to that 75% snap share role. I know we like him quite a bit for IDP just based on what he did for those first 2 games that he was in there, but this has been a one linebacker system for the most part, and the Broncos not given a lot to the linebacker position. They rank 30th in tackles allowed to the linebacker position, so expect Trevin Wallace to play a little bit less snaps this week. But Xavier Woods, the Carolina safety, I have him as safety 14 right now. He's currently the 9th highest scoring safety in IDP, and he has 51 tackles in 7 games, which is just 10 shy of his total from all of last season when he played 14 games. So he's only gone under 6 tackles just once this season, and now draws a really nice matchup against Denver, who are allowing the 3rd most tackles per game to the safety position at 15.7. So I really like Xavier Woods this week. I have him as safety 14, really just on the brink of that safety 1 range. But I'd be starting Xavier Woods if you're looking for somebody in that second safety spot for you. And then quickly, Chow Smith Wade, who is the nickel corner for the Carolina Panthers. He had a really nice game last week, 8 tackles, but only on 57% of snaps. He's replacing Troy Hill, who the team let go in that nickel corner role. There'll be weeks where we can trust him a little bit more, but Denver playing about 62% in 11 personnel this season. That's a below average mark for the position. So or for offenses. So not trusting Chow Smith Wade just yet, but could be, a streaming option in the right matchup. And then on Denver's side of things, Justin Sternad has been obviously very efficient with his opportunities, but the Denver Broncos introduced Quan Alexander to the mix last week. So it did cut into Sternad's opportunities quite a bit last week, especially in the first half. So something to keep an eye on here, because if Denver remains insistent on rolling Quan Alexander out there, despite Sternad playing really well, he's a top 10 graded linebacker this season, which is crazy. It just limits Sternad's IDP potential, and it really pushes him down the ranks as well. So I have him as LB 46 this week, until we at least know for sure how much Quan Alexander is going to be playing, and being a continued part of the defense. Like if they really like him, then last week was just kind of dipping the toes in the water with him and might increase his role this week. If they put him in last week, they realized that, this guy does still suck, then it's good. We can get rid of him. We could go back to Sternad, but there's definitely question marks here, right? So Cody Barton is the lone full-time linebacker. We don't really got to worry about him, but there is at least some hesitancy here in Justin Sternad right now, at least until this Quan Alexander experiment sorts itself out. And then the Denver D-line going against the Carolina offensive line. The Carolina offensive line has been very good. Actually, the numbers on the screen right now are showing Andy Dalton's pressure to sack conversion rate, which has been good for the position. But Bryce Young is expected to start Andy Dalton in that car accident this week. So Bryce Young has not been as good at avoiding sacks. So it's a tough match in the offensive line for guys like Jonathan Cooper and Zach Allen. But Bryce Young has at least been taking sacks, so could be something there. I still like Zach Allen as a locked-in DT starter. I have him as DT3. Jonathan Cooper, I have his edge 26. So a little bit of hesitation on him, even though he's been really productive this season. I know he had a down week last week. Moving to Kansas City and Las Vegas next. And just quickly, not a ton for Kansas City. I'll quickly touch on their linebackers. I have Nick Bolton at LB 25. The Raiders are 21st in tackles allowed per game to the linebacker position. Nothing crazy there. So Nick Bolton, he's been fine, just nothing spectacular, and it's not an amazing matchup or anything like that. And then Chris Jones, I have his DT8. Again, very boom bust. We talked about it with Myles Garrett as far as, playing these guys for their upside. And when they have the floors, we shouldn't be surprised when they put up very low scoring games. Again, the whole reason that we're playing these guys is for the multi-sack potential. And just kind of living with the floor a little bit. And Chris Jones very much has that low floor, high upside, right? One of the best pass rushers at the position. So we know what the potential is there. We just got to hope he's able to get home. Again, I have him as DT8 this week. Gardner Minshew going to be back there at quarterback. Raiders offensive line has been decent, but still continuing to trust Chris Jones. And then on the Raiders side of things, we get Patrick Mahomes versus Max Crosby. Max Crosby, I continue to start him. He's another one we're not taking out of lineups. He's edge 2 this week, going against Juwan Taylor. He's had some battles with in the past, but Max Crosby is locked into lineups. I'm not going to expand too much there as my voice gives out. It's not worth it. The Las Vegas linebackers, though, I know Robert Spillane has been quiet recently. I have him as LB9 though, because it's a nice matchup against the Chiefs, who are giving up the 3rd most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Divine Diablo, I think in that LB3 range as well. He's played 93% of snaps for 2 straight games now, which makes a case for him to be viable in more leagues going forward. Because he was only playing about 75% or lower before his injury and at the start of the season. So interesting stuff there to kind of keep an eye on for Divine Diablo. Going against the Kansas City Chiefs this week. Again, it's a nice matchup. If they're in a more passing situations, Kansas City, then maybe Diablo's not on the field as much. But I mean, Kansas City probably takes the lead in this game, starts running the ball. There's could be a nice situation for Diablo in those deeper leagues. And then on the safety side of things for the Raiders, Trayvon Merrick is playing significantly more in the box. He played 53% last week in the box, 43% the week before that. So like him a fair bit. It's like just an average matchup. I got him in that safety 3 range as well. Isaiah Polamau, I have lower than that. I just, again, there are a lot of safeties in the NFL that are playing 100% of snaps. So, if you have him, you can start him because he's playing full-time snaps, but there's other options that I like better that are getting better usage. And then speaking of usage, Nate Hobbs, the cornerback for the Las Vegas Raiders, moved back to a nickel-only role last week. He's kind of been inconsistent as far as their usage with him. So again, tempering expectations for Nate Hobbs based on our most recent usage from him. I got him as CB29. Kansas City, they're playing a below average offensive 11 personnel rate at 60%. So if Nate Hobbs continues in that nickel only role, he's going to be coming off the field quite a bit. So don't love that for Nate Hobbs IDP value. All right, Chicago and Washington is next on the list here, and Chicago, fairly easy defense to diagnose here. Chicago's linebackers, both startable. I have TJ Edwards as LB8, Tremaine Edmonds as LB22. Washington giving up the 14th most tackles per game to the linebacker position, although they'll probably have a different quarterback this week with Marcus Mariota. Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard, I think both of these guys also startable. I really like Jaquan Brisker the most because of that box roll. So he's safety 7 for me this week. And then Kyler Gordon, another nickel corner to kind of keep an eye on because Washington, they're another team that plays below average snaps in 11 personnel at around 60%. And Kyler Gordon as that nickel corner, that means he's coming off the field quite a bit as well. So he's CB30 for me this week. Um, and then Montez Sweat, he's solid. I got him as edge 14. He's likely going to be facing Andrew Wiley at right tackle. Wiley's been an average pass blocker, but Marcus Mariota not as elusive as Jaden Daniels, right? So it could be a decent matchup for Montez Sweat as well. And then for Washington, Dorrance Armstrong missed last game with an injury. I think he might be back this week. Same thing, Dante Fowler had a really nice week last week. Obviously, had the pick six. Not expecting that from him again. Both of these guys more just streaming options than anything. I know Caleb Williams has taken some sacks, but the Chicago offensive line has been pretty solid. But I'm not treating these guys up at more than anything other than just streaming options on a weekly basis right now. Although Dorrance Armstrong, if he continues to get to play well, which he has been this season, could be more moving up the ranks a little bit. Washington linebackers, Bobby Wagner, I have his LB4 this week. He's been really solid. The Bears giving up the fourth most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Worried a little bit more for Frankie Louvu, who in that LB3 range for me. He has a 9% tackle rate this season, so really big play dependent as well, and just doing nothing as far as tackles go. We've seen him be inefficient before as a tackler and be more big play dependent. Looks like it's the same thing this season in Washington. So tempering expectations for Frankie Louvu, but essentially a full-time player that we can trust where we've been trusting him in the past. All right, going to Dallas, San Francisco now, Sunday night football, and we'll start with Micah Parsons because it does seem like he will not be playing this week. He was a DNP on Wednesday, DNP on Thursday as well. It already wasn't the best matchup because he was going to see a lot of Trent Williams and Brock Purdy as well, who's done a nice job avoiding sacks. So it would have been tempering expectations on Parsons, but we don't got to worry about it. It doesn't seem like he's going to be playing this week. Eric Kendricks might be back. He's still questionable, but if he's back, I think we can play him. If he can't go, DeMarvion Overshown and Damone Clark are likely going to be the full-time starters to hold down there for another week. But if Eric Kendricks is active, then I like Kendricks and Overshown both. Kendricks I have right now as LB7, DeMarvion Overshown as LB23. And then actually Donovan Wilson draws the best safety tackle matchup this week for the Dallas Cowboys going against the 49ers, who are giving up the most tackles per game to the safety position. So I moved Donovan Wilson up to safety 15 this week because, again, like matchup, I know he's been relatively quiet this year, but could do some damage this week in a positive matchup. On the 49ers side of things, Malik Mustafa also been really solid. I think he's a fine start if you need to. I just, worry about these San Francisco 49ers safeties a little bit. They're a little bit more inconsistent because of the usage. So Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa, they're fine. They're playing 100% of snaps. But there's going to be a lot better usage we can target there. The main thing though for San Francisco that I wanted to cover here was Devondre Campbell, who I'm going to move down the ranks a little bit. I have him as a low end LB3, but I'm going to move him even lower than that here in the update because he was splitting more of his snaps with D Winters this past week, which I think could have to do with his poor play this season. We've seen this, ever since Devondre Campbell signed that pretty sizable contract after he had a career year in 2021. His play has just declined every season, and I think he might be losing his grip on that starting role in San Francisco as well. Like, I know they're expecting Dre Greenlaw back at some point. It seems like maybe they might not even want to wait until that point. So we'll have to keep an eye on Devondre Campbell, but definitely losing value. Fred Warner's, the guy's LB1. He's been amazing. We don't got to worry about him. Nick Bosa, edge 5 on the year in scoring. He's edge 3 in the ranks, still as dominant as ever. He is giving us exactly what we've wanted from him when we drafted him as a top 5 player at his position. All right, Monday Night Football is next and last here. The New York Giants at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wanted to highlight Brian Burns, who I have his edge 7 this week because I like the matchup. He's played well this season, though not like anything too different from like his previous years in the league. His current pass rush grade, 77.7. It's actually lower than his career mark heading into this year, which was an 83.3. And his current win rate, 12.8%, is just slightly lower than what it was last year at 13.1%. And his current pressure rate, 13.9%, also just the second best of his career. The difference, I think, is that Burns now has a sack in 3 straight games, giving him 4 on the year, which is already halfway to his season total from last year. So there might be some recency bias that allows him to kind of appear better than what he's been, if people are getting excited about Brian Burns. But really, he's just been the same player. He's just, getting the sacks, which again, those things tend to kind of even out as the season goes on. But again, that being said, he hasn't been bad, not by any means. I don't want that to come across as he's been bad. He's just been the same player that he's been. Draws a favorable matchup this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are a bottom 10 pass blocking unit. They've allowed the 5th highest pressure rate this season at 39.6%. Could be a nice matchup here for the entire Giants defensive line to get home against Russell Wilson this week. Russell Wilson, we know, last year led the league in pressure rate that was charged to the quarterback themselves. So only a small sample size here from his first game last week, but I expect him to start getting back to his usual ways as well. Dexter Lawrence, obviously, we're starting DT required leagues. He's been amazing. Dexter Lawrence, he's just incredible. Azeez Ojulari, I think, is a fine streamer as well. Bobby Okereke, man, it's an ideal matchup for linebacker tackles. Steelers giving up the most tackles per game to the linebacker position. It's just Bobby Okereke's he's been so inefficient as well. Like I have him as LB30 this week. If he can't deliver this week, I mean, the guy might be toast. I've been calling him a matchup dependent linebacker this season because of his inefficiency. And in better matchups, he's a start, and this is one of those better matchups. So I think we could trust him. LB30 might be a little harsh. You could, move him up maybe ahead of a couple guys, but if he puts up another dud in this one, it might be over for Bobby O. We'll have to kind of see, but he's 100% player. Well, I think he should be able to have a fine game this week. And then Tyler Nubin, very quickly, I have a safety 18, played 53% in the box last week. Tyler Nubin, the rookie, looking pretty good here for IDP purposes. And then on the Steelers side of things, speaking of matchup dependent linebackers, it's the battle of mid between Patrick Queen and Bobby Okereke this week at linebacker. They're 2 sub 12% linebacker tackle rates battling it out here. Decent matchup for Patrick Queen as well. The Giants giving up the 8th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. He could have some value, but again, he's just been very inefficient. So there's a good chance that you have better options. I have him as LB31. So I've literally lumped him and Bobby Okereke together. Again, might be harsh, but they've done nothing to prove otherwise. So they'll kind of have to show it this week, but you can definitely do worse than both of these guys in good matchups, and they're playing 100% of snaps. Only other things that I wanted to shout out for Pittsburgh, specifically Cameron Hayward. I have him as DT4 this week. He is now in his 14th NFL season and still performing as one of the top defensive tackles in IDP. Currently as DT3 on the year in PFF's IDP scoring. Not only has he remained productive enough to be like a top IDP asset, but he's currently the highest graded interior defensive lineman in the NFL with a 90.6, and he ranks 3rd in pass rush grade with an 85.7. He's also 2nd among the Steelers defensive linemen in total snaps and just continues to be a workhorse. I think that we can comfortably start every week for IDP. He faces off against the Giants this week. Their interior offensive line ranks 26th in pass blocking grade this season with a 53.9. So really just wanted to shout out Cameron Hayward for continuing to be a damn star at the position. 14 years in, just looking as dominant as ever. So yeah, he's been amazing. Want to make sure he got his flowers, as they say. And then Deshaun Elliott, also of the Steelers here, the safety. I have him as safety 19. 14.4% tackle rate. That's better than Patrick Queen and Bobby Okereke, by the way. He's been great. I think we can continue to start him. It's not a great matchup. Giants giving up the 28th most tackles per game to the safety position, so that's why he's a little bit lower this week, but he's been excellent while guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Patrick Queen continue to kind of be ghosts in that defense. So one more shout out there for Deshaun Elliott. All right, that is going to do it for me this week, guys. I can't thank you enough for being patient with me as we get this episode out later than it usually is. We'll be back on the regular scheduled program here going forward. We can't let the machines win, right? They tried to take us down this week, but little did they know we're too resilient for that. So we had to get the episode out. I know it's a little bit later. We didn't get the Thursday night football preview in there, but we did include a Thursday night football recap. So hopefully that helps. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, watching, liking, subscribing, all that stuff. I very much appreciate you all. Again, if you have questions, feel free to shout them in the comment section. I'll try to do my best to answer those as well. Other than that, IDP Fantasy Report, it's out now, linked in the episode description. Lists all your waiver targets, snap shares, utilization nuggets, and lots of my thoughts for every IDP team. The rankings will be in there as well in the episode description. I'm going to update those today. It's Friday morning right now. I'm going to update them pretty quickly here. So you should be able to see where guys are sitting as far as injuries go and stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, I'll be back on Monday morning with the Week 8 IDP recap, which hopefully can chill the F out with all the injuries for once. But either way, be sure to check that out. Always plenty of nuggets in there. So appreciate you all. Good luck in Week 8. And until next time, peace out.